Okay, we are live. I think I've finally got all the technical difficulties sorted out with this. So the last few live streams that I've done on Be Sovereign, and for those tuning into this, all of the Way Forward podcast episodes from now on, if you want to watch them live, they will be on besovereign.com, which is a platform that was set up by Sayer G, the founder of Green Med Info. Incredible platform, and it's awesome what he's doing to help support content creators, and there's ways to monetize with this. It's really, really cool. But I have been messing it up and not scheduling it properly, so I'm pretty technologically deficient, despite my age and despite me being in this space for a while now. But I think I've got them sorted out now. So David, thank you for joining me, man. I've been fascinated with your work for quite some time. I was put on to you by a good friend of both of ours, Dr. Edith Ubuntu Chan, incredible human being. And I've particularly been interested in your unschooling and your homeschooling content, because that's so important right now. But I know that you cover much more than just that. I'd like to start this interview, though, by asking you about your background and how you even got to this point. You know, we were talking before this, you and I have very similar perceptions on a lot of the things going on in the world right now. So what's your background, man? How did you get involved in doing what you do now?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here. And I know your audience is some of the visionaries on the planet. A lot of respect for you and your audience. The quick background is that I was raised in a small town and pursued business. And I thought my original dream was just to make a lot of money and sit on the beach. And that was my life. And then I started digging deeper into purpose, into life. And I had a mentor, a very successful guy. And he said, you know, even if you make $10 million, you still have time on earth. So you want to think about your time. I said, oh, okay. So he said, find an injustice and spend your life trying to correct that injustice. And so that I thought about that for a while. And then I looked into the school system because I went to public school and come from a family of many public school teachers and principals. And John Taylor Gatto was a huge influence on me in terms of what the purpose of schooling was designed for. And so I found out it was designed to create obedient workers, clerks, and soldiers. I said, this is not okay because the military industrial complex harms a lot of innocent people. And so I started to see that the path forward was through education. And so I got into that, exploring. I created an expo called the Education Options Expo to find the respectful models of learning, because the problem with schooling, and there's a lot of them, but one of them, and the key one, seems to be compulsory attendance. And of course, compulsory curriculum, because learning is fun. Learning is exciting. And so I kind of got into business with him, reached out to see how I can assist him. I ended up.
How many years ago was this?
This was maybe 6 years ago.
Okay.
5 or 6 years ago. And so anyway, so I was pursuing business. I sold my first business at age 26 and moved to Korea and taught English, you know, at a private school in Korea, and just exploring, kind of seeing what this whole experience of being a human is all about. And then once I kind of settled down, I said, okay, I can find some solutions in the education world. And that's kind of why I found voluntary relationships, voluntarism, and we'll talk about that later. And I was an eager kid, maybe like you or some of your audience. Like, I wanted to know the truth. I was asking questions, and the adults around me gave me these BS answers. And I'm like, okay, you know, you're 8 or 10. You're like, that's the way it is. And you find out that nobody really knows what's going on, right? Everybody's kind of here experiencing life and trying to pay the bills and have a family. And the bigger dream is to empower the next generation, to set our children and grandchildren up so they can be better off than we are. And the path seems to be education, empowering the individual. So getting kids out of the school system is very exciting to me, empowering the parents who have their public school training and statism, as we call it. And then it's like, wow, there's only a few voices out in this place that are speaking truth. And Gatto is one of them. And there's other people as well. But I think until we address the root cause of how we got here to the global tyranny that we're seeing right now, we're just going to keep repeating it. And I found out that we're all equal and you own your body, I own my body, and that's the fundamental to go forward. And so the hope is in the young people, of course, ourselves. Rather than blaming people, you point the finger at people. Well, you got 3 or 4 fingers pointing back at myself. So it's like, what am I doing to make the world a better place instead of complaining about it? And I think that's the bigger game is intergenerational freedom, empowering the young people. And it's a big mountain to climb, but what else are we going to do while we're here in the meantime? So that's kind of how I got into the education business and world, and letting parents know what's really going on and what they can do to empower their son or daughter so that they can be a solution maker and not just a complainer that sits on the sidelines. But this experience of being alive is a beautiful thing, and so we want to get on the field and play and experience and learn, and then pass it on to our kids. Just like I don't call them the elite families or people. I call them the hyper wealthy predator psychopaths. God bless them,
Definitely
but
a better way to describe it.
they're not elite. We're equal, and they put this mind control on us that whatever they can rule us. And interesting factoid is, the word government comes from Latin gubernare mente, which is control of the mind. So these are part of the pieces that got into it. And then I was a big Ron Paul guy in I guess 2008. It was more 2012 when I started to really he's our hero. And his election got stolen, in my opinion, and the media just pushed him to his side. I said, maybe politics isn't the way to solve problems. And so I started
Interesting
attending.
point on that. A few of my friends actually campaigned for him, and it was for the Republican primary against, I believe, Mitt Romney in 2012. They campaigned for him, and that's when they discovered and witnessed firsthand that the people wanted Ron Paul. The people very clearly wanted Ron Paul as the Republican nominee, and the people did not get Ron Paul. They got Mitt Romney instead, and it made absolutely zero sense to a lot of people. And that's when they started going down the rabbit hole of okay, we have this illusion of democracy, this illusion of choice, this left versus right false paradigm. They keep us at each other's throats, and that's how they went down that rabbit hole, is witnessing that firsthand with Ron Paul.
Yeah, and it's really heartbreaking because actually that was the first campaign that I actually went to people's doors and put the little thing out there. I'm like, yeah, Ron Paul. I'm in the Bay Area, and I didn't understand demographics or these kind of things, but it's like you put your energy in. And I think Ron Paul had the most donations from the military in I think it was 2012, might have been 2008 as well, but the military, we don't want to kill people any longer. We don't want to bomb innocent women and children. And, there's an argument for self-defense, but it's like, how did our freedoms get to Afghanistan, or even now with Ukraine, or, if somebody's attacking our house or us, we can defend ourselves, but to go out there, as he called it, blowback. So when the military drops bombs on these people, it creates more terrorists or more hate for America. And he just kind of educated the people. And that's why I got a lot of respect and love for Ron Paul. Although he didn't really pass any bills, he used his platform as an educational platform, because he knows that that's where the victories and losses are, is what do you think about? What do you believe? And he changed so many people's minds, including myself. And then you see that the voting system is rigged, and you're like, well, what can we do? We can't just sit around and be complacent. And so this is, now we're talking about, one solution is intergenerational freedom on exit and build. I love this concept as well, where leave their systems. And this is what John Gatto taught me. He said the school system is so far gone to be reformed. And if you want to get your child an education, then you got to get them out. And that's I know a big hurdle for many parents, but
let's talk about that though. Let's talk about going to the depths of the problems for those that are tuning into this. There's a lot of parents, a lot of mothers that will probably listen to this episode that have their kids in public school system, and a lot of them are probably thinking, I have no other choice but to keep my kid in public school. I can't afford X, Y, and Z, these things. And I know there's solutions to those, but first let's identify, just to set the stage, the problems with the public school system, because I am of the opinion, and I'm sure you are as well, that how a situation like COVID arises and takes hold is that we are taught from a young age, and this is just one of many aspects, we are taught from a young age to deny our own observations, experiences, our own intuition, deny our own ability to critically think, and outsource that to exclusively to, in the school system, teachers, and then whatever subject you're being taught, the experts who are behind that material that is being taught. And I think that's where it ultimately starts.
100%, and it's designed that way. And in fact, this is the book that I published for John Gatto, the underground history of American education, an intimate investigation of the prison of modern schooling. And then it goes over where the system came from. It came from Prussia, Germany, specifically to create soldiers and citizens, people that don't need like a whip or to be under gun or threat, but they would actually police themselves in their own mentality. And so this is what we see in the school system is mandatory attendance, mandatory curriculum. You have to get permission to urinate or defecate, and you're 15 years old, 16, 17. It's like, what's going on here? And the concept of statism is the belief in state authority. And rather than, like you said, following your own observations and your own intuition and gut feelings, now you're asking permission to get a drink of water for 12 years of your life, and you're pledge allegiance to the flag. And I like what the flag used to stand for, or what it stands for still, but it's used as a tool of manipulation.
This is
And
a big one, because there's a lot of people in the health freedom space that are coming from a very right-leaning perspective. And I've actually been at several events where they start with saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and I respectfully do not participate, and people look at me in a shocking manner, and it's because of that. It's pledging allegiance to a, for lack of a better term, cult that is
yep.
behind the United States government, which is really a corporation. So
you got it. And it's actually a death cult. So I'm glad we can have this conversation, because I'm like you. I would go to a family member's football game and I wouldn't stand and salute. And then I had a family member come tell me, he said, "Hey man, it's really disrespectful that you're not saluting the flag." And I said, "You know what, brother?" I said, "I think it's really disrespectful that 1 million Iraqi civilians got killed." And he said, "Well, the soldiers don't join for that intent." I said, "I know. It's all about, I have family in the military right now. I love them.
dude,
They're good
I'm an
humans."
ex-Army officer, so I don't know if you know that about me. I went to West Point. I was in the Army for 5 years, and I got out last April. And I woke up to this around 2016, right when I commissioned as a second lieutenant, and I had to serve a minimum of 5 years.
Mm,
And that is a big one, because it's sad, because people in the military, for the most part, like the predominant majority, are very well-intentioned people who mean well, who think that they are signing up to defend the freedoms and defend democracy, both against enemies, foreign and domestic. And that's like clearly not the case, and it's a manipulation. And it's not that we're disrespecting the soldiers and the people who are standing up, because they are well-intentioned people. It's that they are being tricked into fighting, quote, fighting for something that is not what they are actually fighting for.
absolutely. And this is why over 20 veterans commit suicide every day, because they send them abroad, they go and kill people, and then they have nightmares and they put them on these psychotropic drugs. And now they're actually having to face the demons of what they created in themselves, but they chose to do it voluntarily. And of course, they don't really help the veterans, deal with this stuff. And it's really sad. And so even this relates to the school system as well. In all public employees, there's a lot of good people, and my family worked in the public services and schools, so I know there's amazingly good people, but they're inside of a system that is based on coercion and violence and intimidation. And so it really is a great marketing job that they do. The Army has great advertisement, the Marines, the Navy. I see those advertisements, I'm like, yeah, I want to go, because they sell it so well. And so that's what parents can really understand, that they're trying to recruit your son or daughter into these areas so that they can go do the hard work for these hyper wealthy psychopaths. And these guys aren't putting on the uniform and going to shoot and kill people overseas. They're sending, the quote is, sending poor people in one country to go kill poor people in another country, while the wealthy predators benefit from the arms sales and the geopolitical environment and these kind of things. And it is so important that we understand that these are well-intentioned, good people generally, but they haven't got the complete circle of morality. And one of the terms that I heard that I didn't hear in college, I have a business degree and didn't hear this, called a moral compass. I'm like, a moral compass? What's that? It's like, well, how do you determine right from wrong? I'm like, well, that's a really important thing. And it turns out that it's called the non-aggression principle. And you can do anything on earth that you want as long as you don't harm another person or their property. You don't initiate harm. Now, if somebody attacks you, your property, your life, your family, you're morally justified to defend yourself and defend your family. But to initiate, that is where the moral wrong comes into play. And they don't teach morality in schools for this exact reason, which is like, okay, I'm joining the military, I'm getting a $10,000 bonus or 20 or whatever it is. Now, what is my job going to be? Well, I have video of a family member, and it says, I will protect and defend the Constitution, foreign and domestic, as you stated, and I will obey the orders of my superior officers. And I couldn't believe that that is part of the oath. And so you're ordered to go kill these people. And this goes even back to Vietnam and previous wars. Well, if they say, go kill this village, and I say, no, I'm not going to do that, that's wrong, then you can get court-martialed and then you go to jail.
You know what the perfect metric to determine how do I put this? That how backwards that is? Because like let me give some context too. Like as an officer, when I went to West Point, we learned ethics, and I will say the education on ethics up to a certain point was phenomenal. Like that is where, honestly, because I grew up in a pretty, chaotic environment with my parents and didn't really have a moral compass impressed upon me. That is where I really learned one. And I really did is the ethics that are taught with that. But then it's like this weird fitting a like round block into a square hole, or whatever the saying is. It's like they take that ethics, the morality that they do teach, and then try to apply it to killing, and then obviously leave out the context of the purpose of what we're doing. And then when it comes to obeying orders, there's what is taught and then what is put into practice, right? So at West Point, we are taught as like in our training to become an officer, to all, like in the cadet prayer at West Point, it says always choose the harder right over the easier wrong. That is one of the things that is in the cadet prayer at West Point. And then another thing that they talk about is conducting individual risk benefit analyses for yourself and your unit, right? Especially if you're a platoon leader, or a company commander, you're in charge of your unit as an officer. And then another thing that they talk about is always questioning unlawful or unethical orders. And like these all sound great, right? They sound awesome in principle, right? But then in practice, what do we see? Perfect example is what's happening with these injections that are being forced unlawfully, actually, because there is no FDA fully licensed and approved injection available. And that's without even getting the argument of, oh, I am the this is my body is my property, right? That's without even getting those arguments. Even using their legalese, you can argue against what's going on, and it's fully within your lawful rights to decline it because it's an emergency use authorization product. But even so, 99% of the military is falling right in line, and there are officers that are, quote, strictly enforcing and enforcing officers below them and enlisted soldiers below them to receive this product, and it is not following what we are taught, like to again, the denying and not following unlawful orders. Like this is very clearly an unlawful order. So when it's put into practice, just what we're seeing in the last 2 years, it's very clear that what they say is not what they do.
That's right. Yep. And this is the double speak, the double think. And it's like, yes, we stand for honor and integrity, liberty and justice for all, but you have to take this experimental drug or you're fired. It's like, well, where is that? And then, from the highest levels, I think at the highest levels, they are playing the game of death and they know that. But the middle level and low level people, they're just doing their job. And this is what we found doing civil disobedience, going shopping without masks and these types of things. It's like, why are we upset with the worker? They're really just trying to earn a paycheck, and they're enforcing the orders from above. And so this is where courage is really important to instill in the children, instill in ourselves. And it is, I love that, a hard right over an easy wrong. And that's exactly what time it is right now. It's that time right now to say, okay, is this right? Is this wrong? And everything is being questioned at this point, in my opinion. And it should be, because we have been lied to for generations, for the schools, education, the medicine, health, the media, the financial system, and everything else, basically, right? It's like, wow, like everything I was taught has been a lie, and intentionally, because if you empower the individual to self-rule and take personal responsibility for your life, you don't need some guy to protect you. You protect yourself. You have a local, and this is part of the freedom part of it, like local community, local associations, local support. And this is demonstrated in Detroit, Michigan, with the Threat Management Center, because the word voluntarism comes from voluntary relationships, and this is, I believe, the future. Consensual, voluntary relationships. We're all equal, and no one's allowed to use coercion against anybody. And so these
Another term
institutions.
for this that is more controversial is anarchy, and I think that, of course, they have manipulated what we think anarchy is in society. We think it's like burning down buildings and it's a free for all and everyone's imposing and infringing upon each other's rights, but that's not what it is at all. Anarchy is, for all intents and purposes, essentially synonymous with voluntarism, and I think voluntarism is a better way to describe it.
Yep, yeah, that term anarchy has been bastardized in the media, because it is the actual solution to the left-right false paradigm of rulers. And all anarchy means, just like monarchy means one ruler, anarchy means absent of a ruler, no ruler. Therein, you rule yourself. And it is, again, we're playing propaganda and language warfare, and they're changing the words, and so people can't think correctly. So this is what I share with clients, and when I produce content as well, is that we have to understand that every media agency has an agenda. And my show, Freedom Lover Show, and your show is actually pursuing truth. We actually want to find out what is the truth, how we benefit other people. We're not trying to sell you our pharmaceutical drugs and these types of negative products that are going to make you dependent for life and become a customer for life. We're like, we want to empower you and empower your children, and to liberate yourself. And this is one of the great quotes, is that to eliminate statism, we don't have to physically subdue the state. We have to mentally liberate the ruled, meaning us. We're taught in school that we pledge allegiance to the republic for which it stands. And I said, well, why wouldn't we pledge allegiance to honor, to integrity, to truth, to love, to freedom, to peace, to harmony, cooperation, consent? These are things worthy of allegiance, in my opinion. Your family, your values, your religious beliefs or spirituality. But to the republic, to the state, that's what 50 million children are being forced to pledge allegiance to every day. And that's in the US, and worldwide it's over 600 million children. Although I just found out recently, I haven't verified, that the United States is the only country to have a pledge of allegiance, although I have seen history for like Nazi Germany.
Yeah, that's immediately what pops into my mind is that is that it? I mean, dude, because what happens when, okay, you're pledging allegiance to the Republic, you're pledging allegiance to the United States and the flag. Okay, ideally, in a perfect world, that would be a non-corrupt, not run by psychopathic people who are megalomaniacal and obsessed with their own power and trying to exploit and harm you. Ideally, that sounds like it could be really cool. But what happens either, in the past, which I fully believe that this has been a long time coming and everything is now just really being exposed for the most part. But what happens when that state, that republic that you were pledging allegiance to turns, and you're still pledging allegiance to that republic? You're pledging allegiance to the state rather than those ideals and ethics that you were just talking about.
That's right. And then people get trapped. And this is what we saw previous elections, is like, well, it's a necessary evil. You know, you got to choose the Democrats, the Republicans, and, you know, yeah, this is just the way it is. It's like, no, it's not. The way it is what we believe it to be and what we're told it is. And of course, all these movies, you know, talking about how good the CIA is and the FBI and, you know, all these, you know, SEAL team and, you know, like I know there's amazing good men and women on these teams and agencies, but then they're fighting for a paycheck, they're fighting for a pension, you know, all these different personal financial interests rather than quitting. And I have a lot of respect for some of the doctors who have quit the profession and threw their license in the fire and said, you know what, I'm no longer a doctor, I'm a health coach, you know? And it's like, yeah, we're playing the game. This is the
Patients, I
game.
see
It's
clients now, right?
yeah. And this is a solution actually. So rather than playing in the arena and say, okay, necessary evil, you got to choose one. There's only two parties, you know, third party never wins. It's like, what if we leave, we exit their arena and we go just start our own arena? And I think that's where it's all going. Private grocery stores, hospitals or clinics, schools, media companies, anything like that. It's a longer term play, but I think that's an empowering solution that I'm like, yeah, okay, let's do that. It's going to take, you know, a decade or two or generation or two or more, but it's a real solution to empower us versus playing in their arena, pledging allegiance to their organization. And again, you mentioned it earlier, it's a corporation. And it's like, well, what's a corporation? Well, if you've ever started a corporation, it's a piece of paper. You know, you can file in the state of California, you pay the money, it says, okay, you now have a corporation. Okay, well, where is it? It's here on this piece of paper. It's like, that's a corporation? And of course, they don't teach you these things, these fundamental truths. It's all about the paperwork and the social security number and the EIN number and all these things where it's like, well, what's going on here? Because we're just humans. And how did those humans get the authority? And this is, we did a show with a guy named Robert Landon a few times, and it's so powerful because he taught me this phrase: how do you morally justify using violence against a peaceful person? Well, I have a constitution, I have an order, I have this. Okay, that's paperwork, but how do you as an individual morally justify what you're doing? Because you're the one initiating harm against me. Have I threatened you? Have I you know, taken anything from you? No, right? So how do you, and so these are questions where it's like, I don't know, how do I morally justify it? For money? You're doing this for a, you know, $100,000 a year paycheck or something.
Following orders.
Whereas, yes, right, following orders. Oh man, and we kept hearing that throughout the, you know, the last 2 years as well. I don't make the laws, I just enforce them. You know, there's these cops that say that and these workers, and then you're like, okay, so so what do you say to them? Is how do you morally justify what you're doing, man? I haven't harmed you, and that starts the conversation. And no one's going to be persuaded in the instance. Myself, I was like, wow, Ron Paul, he says, I'm the champion of the Constitution. I said, that's awesome. I love the word champion. You know, what does that mean? Okay, you go through the document and read it. Well, I read an essay from 1870 by Lysander Spooner, The Constitution of No Authority, and he lawfully and legally destroyed the legitimacy of the Constitution in a few ways, but one was, can you be bound to a contract that you never agreed to? It's like, no. He says, well, the people who signed the Constitution, Declaration of Independence, they bound themselves by their signature and their voluntary consent, but they can't bind you, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 generations later to a contract that they signed. And so this is a great essay. I recommend people listen or read. And another one is, can you give away a right that you don't have? Can you delegate a right that you don't have? It's like, well, no. Okay, well, if I can't take your money by force and coercion, then where did the government get their ability to take our money by force and coercion? They made it up, they invented it, and then they said, okay, we have to trick the people into thinking this is legitimate. And so that's why statism is a religion, in my opinion. And God bless the Christians out there. And I was raised, you know, as such. And anybody who believes in the state, but it is a God unto itself, and it's really just this kind of imaginary power out there that people hallucinate. You have to obey, but there's just humans, and there's just like a life. But this document and the propaganda of being the top military power on the planet puts so much incentive and geopolitical importance on military and obedience. And you're like, you start to put the pieces together and say, wow, man, this is a really good system these guys put together, although it's killing innocent women and children for decades and generations.
So
But
nefarious and wicked, but like, my God, very clever though. How they
that's
keep
right.
us trapped ourselves. And like the thing that I wanted to touch on real quick too is that even again in the health freedom space, people refer back to our constitutional rights constantly, right? And again, that is just a document and a piece of paper that can be trampled on. And again, just like you said, we never consented to that. We never had a contract with the government. I mean, some of us may have it when we got our driver's license and stuff before we were unaware, but there's ways to mitigate that and correct that. But the other thing is that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, the most important thing about them, if there is importance to them, is that they both either directly or loosely refer back to our God-given inalienable rights as men and
Right.
women. That is what you need to be drawing your power from.
True. And that's a huge breakthrough, actually. Unalienable or unalienable rights. And if you read the Declaration of Independence, it says the just powers of government are derived by the consent of the governed. And I couldn't believe that was in a document from 1776. And then recently I read some of the older documents like the Magna Carta from 1215 and then the Mayflower Compact from like 1685 or 1618, something like that. And then there's the Virginia Declaration of Independence in 1775. And the trend that I saw was that the power people, the people who have the power, the rulers, they don't want to give up their power. And so the Magna Carta and these each document was like one more thing. It was like they're letting go. And so that's where I see the future is voluntarism, consensual relationships in time. And I think it is inevitable with technology and consciousness and media stuff. We're having a conversation right now. We're creating a voluntary world because if you had the ring of power, and this is why I love J.R.R. Tolkien, who I think he said he leans towards anarchy because his story, the Lord of the Rings, was in essence like a metaphor for the ring of power. And even Frodo at the end, he's going to throw that ring into the volcano, and he's like, "No, this is my ring." So all of us are susceptible to power. And this is what I love. One of your recent tweets talking about darkness. It was like, we all have darkness inside of us, for us to think that, yes, we are the light and we are the angels or whatever. There is that part of us for sure. And there's also the dark side, I don't want to say the devil, but like there is the human nature. We have free will. We're allowed to be a bad dude or a good dude. And that's inside of us. And so if we address that and say, okay, there is that quality that I have, I was a kid and I would steal candies or I would lie or do these things. And so as these politicians get older, they just scale up and now they're doing mass murder, 9/11 and these kind of things. You're like, okay, but to address that, I think is very important and to, just be truthful. It's like, okay, we could commit atrocity if we had the ring of power, but the fact that we're having these conversations right now is very exciting, and it is a worldwide awakening. I want to share with the audience. I attended Anarchapulco for the first 6 years and spoke and helped co-produce a couple years, and it's amazing. And I saw it go from 120 people in 2015 to the height I think was at 1,700 people a couple years ago. And my first year, I went to this event by myself because I want to go meet fellow freedom lovers. And the night before the conference started, I went to the pool, or the day before, I went to the pool, and some tall guy came over and said, "Hey, man, are you here for Anarchapulco?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Hey, man, we're down here at the beach if you want to come join us." I was like, "Cool." I went down there. There's about 7 of us. All of us, young guys, came by ourselves, and all of us were from 7 different countries. It's like, oh, he's from Portugal. He's from Germany.
That's so
he's
cool.
from Estonia and stuff. And I was like, wow. So I started to see that there is a worldwide awakening and people are looking for actual solutions, which seems to be self-ownership, the non-aggression principle, voluntary relationships, respect for each other. And as long as you're not initiating harm on somebody, then you can do whatever you want.
Let's go deeper into voluntarism for the people who are unfamiliar with it. Like, what would a voluntary society look like? And I know you briefly touched on the principles of voluntarism, but let's go a little bit deeper on that. And then what would a future fully voluntary society look like? How would it operate and function?
Well, one is that nobody would have the ring of power. And that would be because it's a conscious awakening, right? So the awakening is inner. So we can't change all the politicians and then leave like a slave mindset inside of us. And so when we were out here in Santa Cruz, the last we did it for like 70 Saturdays in a row. We had a bonfire because they shut down the cafes, the restaurants. You literally could go nowhere. So we had a weekly bonfire, and we called it the Voluntary Solutions Bonfire. And we just kept banging that drum of freedom and having these conversations, because most people are statists, as I once was, and maybe yourself and other people. You have to let go of statism, meaning that they have legitimate authority. And there's a great book called Government, the Biggest Scam in History Exposed. And that book goes over it. But how a voluntary world would work, I was so curious about this as well. The police, I mentioned the Threat Management Center from Detroit. That's one solution. And then contracts and the judicial system. And so I said, like, is there any type of writings about? Yes. In, I think, 1971, Murray Rothbard wrote a book called For a New Liberty, the Libertarian Manifesto, and he goes through all of it, and that's free on YouTube as well. You can take a listen to. But, I don't have all the answers. I don't have all the solutions, but I do know it's not okay for governments to force us to do stuff. Like, one of the big ones is the schools. It's mandatory attendance, but the schools are funded by property taxes. So what's property taxes? Well, you pay off your house, let's say $200,000, but then you got to pay 1% to the county every year for life. So in effect, you are on a 99-year lease with the county, although you never consented. And it's like, well, how did the county get possession of your property? Well, this is what's called the intergenerational criminal aspect of it. It's boiling the frogs. Like when the income tax came out, it was 1% for the wealthy people. And then now
it's supposed to be temporary, by the way, income tax,
yes.
Which was like, oh, this is temporarily to boost the economy.
Mm-hmm. Right. Great point. And now it's 20 to 40% for many people. And what's so diabolical about the income tax is that we take our time to earn a living. So our time is our life. And so if you consider, let's say, a conservative 30% income tax from city, county, state, and federal governments out of 1 year, okay, so that's 12 months. That means 4 months, roughly, we're working for the government for free. You compound that for a 45-year career, and that's 15 years that we are working for the government, regardless of what they vote for, regardless of what they do. We're giving 15 years of our life force to them. I said, my gosh, man, this is a true criminal organization, and it really is slavery. So statism is slavery also, in my opinion, because they are taking your life without your consent. And then it's like, okay, so what do we do? Well, at least we have to discuss this conversation. I have a lot of respect for the truckers in Canada, a lot of respect for the truckers in the US, and all around the world. If you're taking action, I have respect for you. And the reason I was sad about what happened in Canada is because they're still stuck in the statism philosophy. Yeah. And so they're begging permission to be free. And so my philosophy is free people don't ask for freedom, we exercise it. And that's what we did at the beaches. We helped open up the beaches in Santa Cruz when they tried to shut down the beaches from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. There's a sign there that says beach closed. Okay. And this was I guess it was in April or May of 2020. And there's nothing more than I love going to the beach on a hot day. I love going to the river on the hot day. They literally came out to the river and kicked people out of the river. And then for the beaches, there's this sign there. And so we got together and, like 12 of my friends, and we got the bullhorn. I said, we now declare the beach open. And then we walked on the beach, and we did that in Santa Cruz. We did that in Carmel as well. And there's some videos of that out there somewhere, but it's a very empowering thing to realize that you are the king, you are the queen. And this is, my temple, my castle, my kingdom is in this body. And when you realize that, you're like, wow, okay, now you're liberated mentally. Now the question is, how can I help others? And this is where, you know, provide these different books that I've mentioned and the philosophies behind it, because I just want to do what's right in my life. I want to have a good life. I want to be able to rest in peace and, you know, pass on the torch of freedom to my kids and grandkids and, you know, whoever else is out there. And that requires an open mind of, okay, maybe I'm wrong. You know, Albert Einstein had a great quote, as did Socrates. Socrates said, "There's one thing I know, and that's I know nothing." And then Einstein said, "Every genius confesses that he or she knows nothing." And I think that's a very honest perspective to look at life and to look at society. And so I look at that in the same way. I don't know all the details how a voluntary world would work, although we almost already have a voluntary society in essence, because you buy your phones through voluntary consent, restaurants, all these things. The only coercion that we've accepted through the statism school and indoctrination there is government, city, county, state, and federal governments. So this is, I think, the house of cards that is falling and will fall, hopefully in our lifetime. But we're just going to keep planting seeds so that people know that I'm responsible for me, you're responsible for you. And one of the other projects that we did out here was free hugs. We did that for like 40 weeks in a row, because we're like, man, these people are really afraid of a virus. They're really like harming themselves and, you know, having trouble in their families. And like, so we want to go give love to people. And as a man, I don't know what your experience was, but it's hard to express love without feeling like it's, oh, I'm in love with somebody, I'm romantically in love. I found out the Greek had 8 types of love, which they described, and agape love was one of them, and that's love of humanity. And of course, there is the family love, romantic, these other types of love. But so we would go out there and give free hugs to people, and it says, sign says free hugs, and, you know, we had music and just raising the vibes, and people will come up and, you know, kind of, it was about 95, 98% positive, but there'd be 1 or 2 curmudgeons, and they're like, I can't believe you're giving free hugs in a pandemic. And I would ask these people, I said, can I ask you a question? Who is responsible for your health? And they would kind of stumble and say, well, I am, and the government. I say, no, the government's not responsible for you. And then another person, well, I am, and the community. I said, I'm responsible for your health? No, I am not. I can't do push-ups for you. I can't run around the block and work out for you. That's your responsibility. And there was one time a lady, she came up with her husband masked up, and she's like, it's, you know, it's really dangerous what you're doing. I said, giving hugs on a voluntary consensual way in public, that's dangerous. Yeah. I said, can I ask you a question? Are you really afraid of a virus? She says, yeah, I'm really afraid. I said, maybe you should stay home, because I'm going to live my life. I believe we're put on this planet for an amazing purpose, just like all of you are. And I'm not going to live in fear. One day I'm going to die, and I'm going to be able to take my last breath and say, I lived a good life, you know? So these are some of the kind of experiments that we did and encounters that we had. It's like, wow, people are really under hypnosis. They're in a trance. And I think what's happening, Alec, I think humanity is bifurcating as we speak. And this is the freedom path and the obedience path. Amen. Or slavery, however you want to call it. And I wish all those people well, but at this point, after 2 years of this, if they can't see something's going on, I feel really bad for them, and they might not be able to come out of it, at least, you know, in the short term. In the long term, I think a lot of people
have an experience, and it may be that they need that experience as, and the experience that I'm talking about is one where they are harmed by the system, by using the system's methods in order to wake up, whether that be pharmaceutical, something to do with taxes. They continue to rely, and their health deteriorates. You know, that we know that the system is going to be pushing for universal basic income, that in order to receive it, you have to do X, Y, and Z. And it's going to have to get to that point for some people to before they wake up. And that's just the reality of the situation. And that's where it's important, though, for people like you and myself and anyone watching this to continue to use our voices to raise awareness to some of the harmful aspects of the system. But more importantly, show that there are solutions, and then show that, like, hey, we're vibing over here, we're thriving, we're doing it better. Like, this is a better way to live. And that's what I want to get into next. Yeah. So we started with touching on the problems with public school, and I think for anyone listening, those are pretty obvious. And I'm sure there's people that are listening or watching this that have their kids in public school, and they're just like not sure of the direction to head, and they know that they need to remove their kids from the public school system in some way. And then there's arguments on, well, how will my kids socialize? And I think it was either you or Dr. Edith who shared one of the best quotes I've ever seen, and it was this little girl. It was the middle of the day, I think around like 10 or noon, and this guy approached her and said, aren't you supposed to be in school? And then she responded with, oh, I homeschool. And then he said, well, how do you socialize? And then she responded, I'm doing that right now. I'm talking to you. And it was such a perfect response. And then, going into, do you even want your kid to be socializing in the public school system anyway, with people who are being indoctrinated and told exactly what to think and not told how to critically think, not questioning things, blind obedience, all the things. So let's get into some solutions and talk about unschooling a little bit and homeschooling and your knowledge on that.
Yeah. So I'll start off first of all, mom and dad, I respect you so much. Having a child is no joke. It's probably the most difficult thing ever, other than maybe an intimate relationship. So deep breath. We understand that there's no manual to this thing. Okay. It's kind of go as you learn as you go. So if you keep your child in the school system, here's one thing I recommend. Help them understand the programming that they're under. So the bells, the permission to use the restroom, the forced curriculum, and let them take a bird's eye view of the system. And so they can see, okay, I can see how this is something's going on here, right? Rather than making them think that is the truth. And I thought school was the truth, right? Like, this is the way it is. And then you graduate high school and you're like, what's going on here? And they're like, well, what do you want to do with your life? And you're like, well, I don't know. Like, you just told me what to study for 12 years. Now it's my choice. So if you help them understand there is some programming going on there, and let them understand. Also, I'll tap into the homeschool thing in a sec here, but I had a family member, and she was in the second grade, and she was very upset and crying when she go to school. And I said, you can, if you homeschool, then you can like not have to go through this whole thing. And she's like, okay. And so she talked to her parents, and they didn't homeschool. But a year later, they put her in a private school, like a private Christian school, where they're not having this crazy agenda, and it was more freedom. And I said, all right, so how's school? She says, oh, it's great. I said, really? I said, do they give you a lot of tests? And she says, yeah, but my mom says it's okay if I don't get good grades. So no, it's good. I'm fine. So just having that mom and dad say, don't take it that serious, right? Like, it's not really serious. It's not nobody really cares what your GPA is in high school. And, most of this is, like I said, the conditioning aspect of it. So if you leave your child in schools, they can be okay. If you're a loving mother and father, you support them and help them. So it's not the only way. Now, understanding what's going on with the jabs, with the sex ed curriculum, which is super perverted. And I think, well, the jabs is a big one. Those are two big ones. And the other harmful aspect is that they remove the love of learning. Your child loves to learn. That's how they learn to walk. That's how they learn to talk. They're looking at you so eagerly, and they're modeling and using your words, and they can pick up English. They can pick up any language, actually, just by hearing. So they love learning. You want to keep that alive. Okay, so you don't have to be the teacher at your homeschool. Okay, and then the philosophy of my school, Valor Academy, which I do accelerated graduations for teenagers. The philosophy is that the world is the classroom. Okay, so you wake up in your bed, this is the classroom. You go to the grocery store, you go to the mall, the library. This is all learning. Life is the classroom, right? And the other aspect is that anybody can be a teacher. If you have something to learn from them, and it can be a book, it can be a human, it could be an app, a device, an experience. Mistakes are the best teacher in some cases, right? So this is another problem with school, is they shame if you make a mistake. They make you feel bad, whereas mistakes are one of the best teachers. So those are the two philosophies of my school as part of my coaching. But then I can give you a few phases of homeschooling. So if you homeschool, this is what happens. You pull your child out and then you try to replicate the school in your living room or in your kitchen. And this is not homeschooling, in my opinion. This is called school at home. And you're going to burn out and your child's going to be unhappy. And then you're going to evolve and you're going to do something called deschooling. Deschooling is where you decompress from all the pressure and all the superficial urgencies in these schools. It's like if you have a bottle of soda and you shake it up, before you can drink it, you have to take the cap off and let all the pressure leave that bottle. And that is your child. They're under all this stress and homework and deadlines and 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. and just ridiculous.
Like these, timelines of like, they must learn this by this time. Like even people who do homeschool their kids, right? Like, oh my God, my child's 6 and they haven't learned their division tables yet. What am I going to do? Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like,
yes, absolutely. Those timelines, they're invented, they're made up in teacher colleges again. And this is not to say that the teachers have any understanding of what's going on. They're well-intended, good people, I would say, most of the time. But the high-level social engineers know exactly what they're doing, and they're actually trying to create like a utopia. And so that's what's happening in schools now with the global citizen stuff. Is they want to make your child a global person rather than a young man or young woman. And so you have the school at home, which is where the stressful and you burn out, and then D-school. And the rule of D-school is that for every year your child was in a compulsory learning environment, you want to give them a month of total freedom. So let's say your child's in the 6th grade. Well, that's 6 years. So you want to give them 6 months to sleep all day, to play video games all day, to do nothing, to draw, to do whatever they want, so they can get back to homeostasis and say, okay, I am me. I'm a living being. I'm a soul, and this is important what's happening. And then they will actually want to learn, because that's what we want to do. We want to learn. Once we're like, man, life is a mystery, man, this is exciting. They will want to learn. And so you go to phase 3, and that's called homeschooling. My definition of homeschooling is when a leader creates an atmosphere where personalized learning can occur. And so that's you, mom and dad. You create that atmosphere. What type of atmosphere do you want to create? An atmosphere of peace, of rest, of respect, of no judgment, of mistakes are okay. And you create that atmosphere, intentional atmosphere. And then the 4th phase, I consider the apex of learning, is 100% self-directed learning, which is like what you're doing and myself and many of your viewers. This is what we realize. Learning is lifelong, and now we 100% self-direct. Mom and dad no longer has to create the atmosphere, because little Susie and Johnny, they want to read. They want to go to the museum. They want to go get an apprenticeship. They want to go to college. And this is what's so exciting about homeschool students, is that colleges actually love homeschool students for this exact reason. If your child wants to go to college at age 15 or 16, they totally can. And then the admissions officer, let's say it's a university, they look at it, homeschool, oh wow, yeah, man, you're admitted, because homeschoolers are serious about what they want to learn. They're not there because mom and dad wants them to be there. They're there because they have their own self-interest in their own life. They realize it's up to themselves. If they want to create a good life, it's up to me. And so those are the 4 phases roughly. And if you can capture some of that, that's kind of the accelerated view of, okay, what's your learning curve going to be? And I used to believe that it takes 2 years for a parent to go from phase 1 to phase 4. But I'm changing my beliefs now, because I'm realizing the urgency, and I have to raise my game in teaching and coaching abilities. And so I'm saying anywhere from 60 to 90 days. If a mom and dad is serious, and you can hire me, and I'll hold your hand and walk you through it, or you can have a Facebook group, and there's other ways you can do it for free. But this process does not have to take 2 years. And so I'm trying to work on my communication and my stories and things, so that you can understand all the questions that you have, mom and dad, for homeschooling. They have been answered, because homeschooling isn't the new way of education. It's the old way, which has been proven for thousands of years. And it's fact how America, the United States, became so abundant, because they were learning to read at a young age. They were excited. They had the one-room schoolhouse, and there wasn't the compulsory nature, which just deprives the learner of this natural joy of learning. So all these questions, Socialization, you gave a great example. One example of socialization as well is going to the grocery store. And we can include how that might work, let's say for math, right? You give your child maybe $5 or $1 or whatever, and they can go around and kind of figure out, okay, how much does this cost? And this is $1. And, that can be the mathematical curriculum. But the forced school system in the US has been here for over 100 years. But before that, it wasn't here. And then so how did America become as it is? Because mom and dad were directly involved. And mom was the lover and father's the provider. And, they're learning on the farm, and it was an agricultural society. And you learn from your older peers. This is why the age segregation of schools is so diabolical as well, because never will you again be around only 8-year-olds, only 12-year-olds and 15-year-olds. And this is one reason I got a respect for Elon Musk. When he started his school, he got rid of the age segregation. It's like, okay, so there must be something to that. But it's been going on for thousands of years. This type of educating and following your own desires and learning for yourself. The word education comes from the root word educo, which means to pull from within, to elicit, to pull out. And so this is why I believe every child is a born genius. They're born amazing. They have maybe their own kind of temperaments or genetics there, but every human has so much potential. And your job as a homeschool leader, as I call it in my Facebook group, is to facilitate and to show them that learning is fun. And you do this by your example. So another hack that there is for mom and dad is that you be a lifelong learner. So rather than tell your child, go learn, you be learning. You be going to conferences, doing online courses, reading, having your own projects at home. And your child comes up to you and it's like, well, what are you doing? Oh, I'm having my own learning project. And the child realized, oh, maybe I should have my own learning project. And then they pick that up by your example. So also another question is about curriculum. These are all phenomenal questions. And so curriculum comes from the root word path, like a course. And so just like your DNA and your fingerprints are unique to all humans who ever lived and ever will, your child's path is unique to themselves, just like your path is unique. So there's nobody who says, okay, this is the curriculum that you need to be successful. It's like, well, you don't know my interests, my dreams, my goals, my fears, these types of curiosities that arise in me. And so curriculum, I'm a little bit leery of curriculums that you download and say, this is the way to do it. Although, there might be some good ones out there that you can find that work for you and your household. But first is to understand what a curriculum is, and then you can actually find curriculum for reading, writing, and arithmetic in all aspects of human society. And so if it's not important to say, go shopping, hygiene, finances, health, relationships, if it's not important for those things, then maybe it's not important, But if your child wants to become an engineer and these kind of things, then they will naturally go that way, right? Some people are really interested in math. Some people are interested in music, and it pulls them that way. So that's kind of a quick, one-on-one over the some of the questions of socialization. Or we can talk about socialization again.
Yeah. What about like the concept of like, I know some people who are in like that homeschool their kids, and then multiple times a week they have them in like nature groups, one or two. The idea of homeschool co-ops.
Yeah. Yep. Beautiful. Yeah. Homeschool co-ops. I've seen a few of those, and those have been proven as well. So rather than having a professional teacher, you bring, let's say, a father or a mother, an aunt, or somebody that you know, and you give them, let's say, okay, you want to teach 3 days a week. Okay. So then you gather the people and say, okay, this teacher who's not a professional teacher, he's like actual engineer. He's an actual scientist. He's an actual musician, artist, chef. He's going to donate some time or, maybe make a few bucks, but he's actually he's making his career cooking or playing music or making bridges and engineer or coding, whatever it is. You bring him in, and then he can actually tell the teenagers or young people, this is what's happening in the real world, and here's my path. And then you get to hear their story. So it's a beautiful thing. The co-ops is definitely a powerful thing. Nature groups is very powerful. My guess in kind of research and conclusions is that the first maybe 8 years, maybe 10 years should be play and allow them to pursue what they want to do, because naturally they will have questions. And there's a great movie about a school in England called Summerhill. It's been around for 100 years. It's all voluntary. It's a K-12 boarding school, but they have everything's optional there. So you show up, they give you a list of classes, and they say, here's our classes. Check off the classes that you want to take. If you don't want to take any of these classes, we have 10 acres here on the property. There's a tree house up front. There's musical instruments in the garage, and go play and go be a kid. Go enjoy yourself. And so they're interacting with different age groups. And of course you play and play, and then like you're tired of playing and you see the older peers actually doing science experiments or doing like real learning. And so they go and they peek and they'll, what are you doing? And oh, I want to do what Steve's doing. Okay, you got to sign up for class. Great. And they sign up for class.
Oh, cool.
Because it's amazing. So I watched this movie multiple times, but every time I watch it, I probably cry. Like,
it's like I can write it down.
Summerhill, produced in 2008. And of course, this school has been around for, so long, but many people haven't heard about it because this, again, is another solution. This is not a homeschool. This is a private school, but it's based on trusting the student and allowing their own curiosities to lead themselves. And it's amazing. It's such a well-produced film, and there's so many situations in the movie where like the adult trusts the child and the child has a breakthrough, and I'm just crying watching this thing. I'm like, I wish I went to this school,
So
because
cool.
it is the future, in my opinion. In fact, there's another school network called Acton Academy, and they're blowing up all around the country, and they're doing real well. And they're also based on that similar type of philosophy. And this is where it is going. They've done really well the last maybe 5 years, and in I think maybe 12 years of existence. There's something called democratic schools, agile learning centers, liberated learners network. These are some of the things I have on my Education Options TV YouTube channel, because I was curious for myself. I'm like, compulsory education can't be it. And then, Gatto and some of these other people turn me on to some of these different philosophies and proven models of learning. And that's where I'm like, okay, this is where it's going. And one of the challenges, and I'll address the charter school question, because charter schools generally are like a little bit better, right? There's a little bit more autonomy for the director, for the children there. However, if you're getting money from the state, then that comes with strings. And so generally it's curriculum strings. And so these charter schools, eventually they kind of become the public school, or model the public school. And even like homeschool programs that give you $1,000 or $2,000 a year stipend. Who doesn't like free money, right? That's awesome. But then that also, maybe you got to do quarterly reports or monthly, and then the teacher comes over and says, okay, well, what have you been teaching? And again, it's the authority figure. And mom and dad, your child belongs to themselves. And if you take it for a little bit deeper, they belong to you, perhaps. They're your genetic material. Okay, this goes into property rights, but
Yeah,
it's all based on
like your property until they turn 18. They're your
That's right.
property.
You're right. So that is as you mentioned before, like natural rights, natural law, truly your genetic property. And then at what point you decide, mom and dad, when they are their own boss, they own themselves. But the sooner the better, in my opinion. And this is where I see children can get it. If somebody would have told me about self-ownership when I was 8 or 10 or 12, I would have said, I got it, because I knew something was wrong. I was like, why are you telling me what to do? Well, I have a funny story. I have a friend, and she's a voluntarist, amazing woman, and she was teaching her child about consent and boundaries. And so her child's 5 years old, and she taught him that if somebody wants to pick you up, they have to ask you. So she says, can mommy pick you up? Yay, mommy picks him up. Okay. Well, they went to like a family reunion with all these family members, but strangers to this 5-year-old. And so an uncle, cousin comes up to him, and tries to pick up the 5-year-old, and the 5-year-old slams his elbows down and says, "Hey, you need permission to pick me up." And the adult was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. Well, can I pick you up?" And the 5-year-old says, "No, thank you." And then it's like runs
Love
off
it.
and plays. I was like, whoa. So they can get
Boundaries.
amazing for boundaries. So the sooner your child can learn about these things, then they can start taking responsibility, and you can start asking them questions about what they're learning, what they want to do. There's another, this is a great interview that Ellen DeGeneres did, and she had I think she was like 3 years old or 4 years old, and she went viral. There was this little girl, because her mom was doing some dance, and the little girl got on video, and the video went viral. And so Ellen asked the little girl, she says, and the girl was a great dancer, right? She was just killing it at age 4. And she says, "So do you want to be a dancer when you grow up?" And the 4-year-old looks at her and says, "I am a dancer." It's like, you don't have to wait. It is now.
Yeah.
And the young people are there for present moment consciousness. And it's really just like, whoa, man, this is a whole different world. So, what we're doing, Alec, and audience, is we're redefining what an education is. And in my opinion, an education is what you do to yourself to create a good life. And that requires the self-direction, self-leadership, self-respect, personal responsibility. And the sooner your child gets that, the easier it's going to be for you. Because I know many mothers and fathers are like, "Man, this is going to be crazy. I got to become the science teacher, the math teacher. I got to do all these things." You don't at all. That is the upside down version of your understanding. And this is what Gatto taught us. The difference between education and schooling is so huge, they cannot even be close to each other. The definition of schooling is what somebody else does to you for their benefit. So you want to have those two words understood, and that way when someone talks to you about education, they say, "Well, an education really can't be compulsory. Schooling can be compulsory, forced schooling, but an education is what I do to myself to create the life that I dream of, what I want to do with my life." So again, it's just like all these definitions of like, whoa, man, this is okay. It's an entirely different realm, and then you can get there right now. One of the challenges is our own programming, going through the public school system. I got to get good grades and SATs and all this stuff, right? Unnecessary. But then one of the challenges is if one of the parents is not on board. And so let's say let's say mom's on board, but then dad, he's out there making money and he's traditional and God bless him. But he's like, "No, they got to go to school. They got to have the subjects. This is how we do it. This is my house." Well, you're going to be in a tough spot if you try to force your husband or coerce your wife or whatever it is. No, this is, it becomes a huge argument sometimes, right? So you want to be compassionate, understanding that they also most likely went through the statist programming system of schooling. So their understanding of it isn't as strong as yours might be as the mother or the father, whoever's staying at home, and what you see. And like, Johnny's really good at this. And like, he likes to sing and that's what he wants to do when he's 8 years old, and we want to get him singing lessons. No, he has to learn his math timetables, because that's what I had to do and it worked out for me. So it's this continual compassionate understanding and connection with your spouse for the benefit of your child. And these are some of the hurdles that if you can get over some of these hurdles, your child at some point, you're not even going to need to like push them into self-directed learning. They're going to learn to read and they'll say, "Okay, I'm done with this book. I want to go read this book. Can we go to the library again?" You're like, "Geez, we just went to the library 2 days ago." "Well, yeah, I read 3 books. I want to go back." It's like, well, calm down. So it becomes fun. It becomes exciting. And then you, mom and dad, get to focus on your own life and your own goals and your own passions that you want to do it. And it becomes this kind of partnership rather than like a dictatorship. And I always tell my clients to consider yourself to be a partner or a facilitator, a coach, and somebody rather than "I'm the teacher, you do what I say." And after they get there, just like, "Wow, I got it." It took me a while and I had to go through my own deschooling process myself, But then once you get there, it's light, it's fun, it's easy, and then we can really focus on like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Love seems to be the reason that we're here. One of them, my opinion. And then you can be that champion of unconditional love for your child rather than feeling obligated like you got to be the curriculum master or any other subject master. You don't have to do that at all.
Yeah, and it brings into question like those things that you feel like your child needs to learn. That's if you are homeschooling, that's been impressed upon you, and you've been conditioned to believe they need to learn those things because of your own indoctrination in the public system, and that's just the reality. David, where can people, aside from your website that I've listed here, for those that are just listening to this, it's davidjamesrodriguez.com. It'll also be in the show notes as well as everything David has mentioned here. But what are some other resources for homeschooling and unschooling that you recommend to people, either your own or someone else's?
Yep. So I have a Facebook group called Homeschool Leader. We have a few thousand members there. I also have a smaller group called Apprenticeship Creators, and this is kind of for teenagers. And I think we have a Telegram Freedom Lovers show, and you can email me at info@homeschoolleader.com. We want to do some consulting. And this is, I think, the time for mom and dad to take a look and see what's going on in schools, and we will help you. And you can join the group for free, or you can bring me on, or however it is. But to leave your child in the system right now is very I think stress inducing for them. But those are some of the places that you can find me. I noticed that you got kicked off of some social media platforms. I've had my YouTube channel deleted and Instagram deleted, and getting kicked or getting frozen on Facebook. So probably email is a good way to reach me, and the Facebook group is probably one of the best ways. I'm also on float.com or float.app/DJ Rodriguez. Other areas where we can have groups, and we're going to continue to produce this type of content, and then coach and figure out. I think we'll probably do a group coaching session here in the next month or two, and get you prepared, because I know you're preparing for the fall right now, and this is the time when you're not under the gun. It's not like September 1st and you got to make a decision. We want to do that ahead of time, and that's what this is all about, is preparing you and getting the foundation laid. And sometimes you have unique situations, and I've coached a lot of parents about what you can do, and kind of how to address and process what's happening. And all I know is that you got this, mom and dad. Is totally doable. It's been going on for thousands of years, and it's just a kind of deconditioning ourselves, and then passing on this personal responsibility. And then it becomes a really fun journey with your young, vulnerable, dependent young son or daughter, and then they trust you. And that's really, I think, one of the key takeaways, is that you want to have trust when they leave your house at age 18 or 20 or 25 or whenever. They know that they can trust you and that you love them. And that's the foundation for a lifelong relationship that's going to go up and down. Everybody has ups and downs. Life, turns out, has a lot of problems in life. And we need the parental support is everything. I give a lot of gratitude to my mom and dad, despite being, in the school system and what they did, and but they love me, and I made mistakes as a child, but they were there, and I just feel grateful that I could have someone that loves me. And that's what the opportunity that you have right now is, to be that support and the safe haven for them, because the world is getting crazier. And God bless these Karens and Darrens out there, but like, it's crazy out there, man. You see,
Never heard Darren before. I like that. Karen and Darren. That's good.
and I have friends that are Karen and Darren. I just, no disrespect, it's just kind of a
That's
way to
good though, dude.
understand.
I'm gonna start using that. Darren's. That's good.
Yeah. So yeah, you can find me those places, and I hope you do stay in touch. And maybe we'll continue the conversation, and we will continue the conversation. It's intergenerational, because this whole thing didn't get here overnight, and that's what and probably your audience. They've been building this thing for at least 30 years, since the 1986 Vaccine Injury Act. It's like, okay, so we're not going to fix it in a year or a few years, but just like when you turn the wheel of a big ship, slowly it turns, and that's what's happening right now. Consciousness is changing, it's turning, and people are looking, and it seems that self-ownership, non-aggression, equality for all, nobody gets the ring of power. this, I think, is the future, and we need your son and daughter to rise in their own leadership if they want to be some of the solution makers and game changers. And that's why homeschooling, I think, is the future. Self-directed learning, unschooling, apprenticeships. This is the way out of this amazingly dark school system. But there's still hope. Like I said, you can still have your child in there. Just help them understand what's going on, and then that way they don't, feel these negative thoughts and consider, the legitimacy of their power and authority. But self-power, personal authority, is very exciting, and I think young people are ready for it.
Amen. Thank you so much for coming on, brother. And the last thing I want to share with people, and then I have one final question for you that I ask everyone, is it's shifting out of this mentality of what your child should be, right? And I struggle with this as a parent. I have a 4-year-old that we're starting to, bring in some education for, and it's shifting out of this mindset of what your child should be and what they should be learning, and fostering an environment of what your child already is. That's the difference. It's not shaping them into what they should be. It's helping them become a more complete version of what they already are.
That's right. Yeah, and this is so powerful. Like 4 is amazing age. I love like 4 to 7 or 8. Amazing. Their subconscious is fully open, and so when you speak into them, their eyes are like this big, and you're speaking to their subconscious because they don't have that critical mind yet. So when they look at you, mom and dad, whatever you speak is basically going into who they are becoming and who they see themselves as. So whatever you desire, kind of put those away. But we ask, mom and dad, what do you desire for your child? And you want a healthy, happy, productive young son or daughter, so you can speak that into them. And we can go over some of these things at another time. But yeah, it's amazing, man. Congratulations to have a 4-year-old. That's very cool.
It's a fun age. It's a really fun age, and watching like the relationship between my 4-year-old son and my 1-year-old daughter, and she's starting to like, venture into playing with him a little bit and interacting with him a lot more. It's really cool to witness. So as a final question, I ask this every guest, and the reaction's always great. So hypothetical scenario that probably wouldn't happen with someone like you or I, but imagine a news reporter came up to you on the street and stuck a microphone in your face and said, you have 2 to 5 minutes to share whatever you think the world needs to hear. This is going to be on primetime TV all over the world tonight on every mainstream news platform. What would you say?
Beautiful question. My friends, who owns your body? This is the fundamental question that can save the planet from these hyper wealthy predator psychopaths who've been running it for generations. They've been ruling the financial system, the school system, the medical system for too long. And if you think that they have authority over you, maybe you can consider doubting that or questioning that. Because if this is my hand and I'm responsible, then your hand belongs to you, and that is your body. And this is the way that we can actually move forward to evolve, because the monarchy used to be considered legitimate. And then the Magna Carta said, no, King John, you have to respect our rights. And then it evolved. So we're evolving from a monarchy to a constitutional republic. I think we're at the very beginning of the evolution of self-rule, self-governance, personal responsibility, collaboration, cooperation, consensual, voluntary relationships at all times. And the only exception is if somebody uses force, fraud, or intimidation against you. And this is so important that young people learn this. So first, we have to learn it from ourselves, learn it inside of us, that we are born free. And whether you believe in God or nature or whatever, you own your life. It is a gift. Your consciousness is precious. You came to this planet for something significant, especially now in 2022. And your children may be the star seeds, maybe the indigo children, maybe whatever crystal children. This amazing time to be alive. And they are the hope of the family, the hope of humanity. And just like we're learning this stuff right now, as they learn this stuff, they're going to be so liberated, so happy, so healthy, so fulfilled. And they'll be able to thank you, mom and dad, for taking them out of the school system, for empowering them if you never put them in the school system, for being the source of unconditional love until they develop that for themselves. And I think the school system, the financial system, the health system, all these things will be going away at some point, but you are the visionary. We are the ones that we've been waiting for, and it is time for freedom. It is time for personal responsibility. We're going to exit their systems. We're going to build a voluntary world, one relationship at a time.
Damn, that was good. That was perfect. That was perfect, man. David, thank you for joining me, brother. It has been a pleasure talking with you, and I look forward to talking with you more and hanging out in person. So thank you so much,
Absolutely.
man.
Hey, thanks for being a courageous man on the land and speaking your truth and putting your neck out there, because people don't realize when we speak truth, even just having this conversation, it takes a lot of guts to come out here and speak truth as what we see. And so, yeah, thank you for you and what you're doing on the planet. And yeah, look forward to connecting again. A lot of respect and peace and love. Lock my phone, lock my laptop. Peace and love to you, man. And we'll do it again.
Love you, brother. Thank you so much.
Love you too, man.